Well, hello, it's Hamilton Fan 1705 here, and I'm here with my 4th episode of the F1 Weekly Series. And for this week's episode, I'm going to discuss the Malaysian Grand Prix. And on the whole, in my opinion, I think it was a very good race. I mean, it had lots of overtaking in, and my favourite driver won in the end. Lewis Hamilton confirmed his title bid, finally. He was able to win the Malaysian Grand Prix, and Mercedes were able to get their first 1-2 finish since Fangio and Taruffi. I'm not sure what year, I'm just checking now, in 1955. So on the whole, the start, I'm going to discuss the start. The start went well. The start went well for Hamilton, and I was really pleased. I think Ricciardo was probably the winner off the start line. He was probably the best of all the starters. I mean, what a start he did. He got alongside Vettel and was able to pass him. And then there was quite a lot of battling. There was the Maldonado Bianchi incident, which you couldn't really see whose fault it was, but from the view I had, well, you could kind of see. I think to be honest, at first I was thinking, oh, Maldonado's caused an incident as usual, but then I realised. But then when they showed the replays, we found it. I saw that it was Bianchi's fault, the incident, and I think he did kind of deserve the 2 penalty points. And Maldonado actually retired for a different reason. Looking at the results on F1.com, he retired due to a problem with the power unit. But then going into it, I think I was really impressed with the performance of Hulkenberg. He was able to do a 2-stop. Shame that he lost out to Alonso in the end, in the closing laps. But I think, as many of you have seen me say on Twitter, I think that Force India has the ability to win races. In fact, I think that there are 6 cars on the grid this year that have a possibility of winning races. And they are Mercedes, obviously, because they've won the first 2, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Force India and Williams. And that could come up to 7 if Lotus can sort out their financial issues. But still, speaking of Force India, Perez, he's been quite unlucky this season. He's unlucky when he gets a puncture in Australia, and today he couldn't. Obviously, this was recorded on the day of the race, by the way. It's probably going to be being uploaded on like Wednesday. Obviously, you'll know when it's been uploaded because it's already uploaded. Or obviously not when I'm recording this. What the hell am I talking about? Anyway, back to the thing. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But Perez had a gearbox failure just before on the reconnaissance lap, which was a shame. Looking down the result, obviously Vettel got 3rd. I think Mercedes should be worried. They can't just relax because that Red Bull is closing. And if they don't relax, then Red Bull are just going to close and easily beat them, and Vettel's going to get his 5th title. Alonso, the Ferrari seems to struggle in the early part of the race, but then comes the late part of the race and they seem to be a lot faster. Obviously, I mentioned Hulkenberg finishing in 5th. Button, not the best of races for him. 6th, finished 83 seconds off Hamilton. Then behind the final cars on the lead lap, Massa and Bottas. Massa ignoring team orders, which I found quite interesting, because obviously Massa in his Ferrari days, they said it was all that he's had to move over for Schumacher so many times in his career, but he was actually only teammates with Schumacher for 1 year. It was kind of Alonso he's had to move over for mostly. But anyway, back to the topic. Massa finishing in 7th, had Valtteri Bottas in 8th. And then Kevin Magnussen. I think Magnussen, that penalty he received was ridiculous. From what in my opinion, I think Raikkonen turned it on Magnussen. I don't think there's anything Magnussen could have done. And then Magnussen gets the penalty, which I find ridiculous. Then rounding out the points, Danny Kvyat. I think he could be the next big Red Bull driver. I think once Vettel moves off to a different team, or once he retires, I think Kvyat will be the person who gets promoted. I think Kvyat and Ricardo, two upcoming champions, I think that would be a very strong lineup. And then Grosjean, obviously he made it to the finish, which is beyond everyone's expectations, ahead of Kimi Räikkönen. Obviously he had that incident, that puncture, which in my opinion, obviously I said was his fault. Then Kobayashi, he had a very good race today. He was fighting in a Caterham with the Toro Rossos and the Saubers. Obviously both Saubers would eventually retire, but I think that Caterham have probably the best car that they've had so far in their career, even though not the best looking with that nose that they have. Then Marcus Ericsson and Max Chilton finishing 2 laps down. Retirements, Daniel Ricciardo. He is probably the most unluckiest driver ever right now. I mean, Australia gets disqualified, and Malaysia, the team make a mistake and release him with a loose wheel. And obviously the two Sauber I think have a lot of problems with their car. It's not quick at all. Verne obviously had problems with the car. And then Verne obviously had that turbo failure. And obviously I mentioned Bianchi, Maldonado and Perez. So that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of the Malaysian Grand Prix. What I'm going to talk about now is the Bahrain Grand Prix next week, which obviously is a night race for the first time. And I think that could actually affect the racing because temperatures will be lower, which will mean there'll be a lot less stress on the new power units, which are a lot less reliable in the heat, because then they're more prone to overheating. And I think the fact that it's a night race will raise the amount of finishers we have next week. I mean, Bahrain didn't really produce any exciting racing until 2012. 2012 was quite a good race in Bahrain, and 2013 was one of the most exciting races of the season, one of the few exciting races of the season. Bahrain, I think, is going to be very interesting to see if we're going to see Mercedes maintain their form, or whether we're going to see Red Bull jump ahead or someone else jump ahead. Also, obviously, I mentioned in the last F1 Weekly episode that the GP2 season starts, and that is going to be very interesting. And that'll mean there'll be more grip on race day in terms of the F1, because there'll be rubber from the GP2 race on the track, which will mean there'll be more base grip come the race. And it's going to be a very interesting race, I think, Bahrain. Anyway, that's about it from me in terms of this episode. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next week for the next episode, which will be probably the Bahrain review for the F1 Weekly Series.